Congratulations on Little Women Ballet. Um, to begin with, why did you choose Little Women as the inspiration for this ballet?
I really love the story and how it centers around four strong female heroines who, even though, we love their story, it's very traditionally,
Mhm.
normal. Like, we can all relate to it on a personal level, very normal, traditional lives that a lot of us can relate to. And so I liked that that was kind of the forefront of the story. A lot of ballets tend to put female characters in kind of like a secondary role or a role in which they're, saving their male counterpart or something to that effect. So I really liked that this centered on the journeys of the women and that it was something that a lot of the general public could relate to.
There's a lot of emotion in this book, in the novel. How do you translate that type of emotion into a dance performance?
Yeah, a lot of our rehearsals are very in-depth talking about the characters and about the emotion that goes into it. And so every moment I really wanted to make sure that the dancers not only understood the choreography, but they understood what their character was experiencing while in this particular part of the story. So a lot of our rehearsals end up being talking about emotions and about the characters and then talking about how different gestures and little nuances tend to show different types of like emotional behavior and stuff like that. And then how you relate to other people on stage and how, certain gestures can affect the emotion of a piece and stuff like that.
How did the Heritage Square Museum fit into your vision for this ballet?
Yeah, we had thought about doing an immersive experience, which is something that's quite popular today, but not necessarily for dance. And when we saw the space and the beautiful architecture that was there, and kind of these very well kept, like sh shrines to history. It felt like a great moment to kind of celebrate that as well as just to incorporate the dance. So when the audience is in the houses, they are very close to the dancers, but you're also seeing all that architecture. You're seeing all that beautiful furniture from the Victorian era. And even though it's a representation of, the Victorian era in Los Angeles's history, and not Concord, Massachusetts, where the book originated, it still gives you paints a very vivid picture of what it would have looked like back then. And so it helps kind of put the audience in that setting more literally than we would have if we were just on a stage.
For you, you're still fairly young. You're only 26. You're an artistic director. You're a choreographer. How is it that you rose through the ranks so quickly to, have people trust you to create a ballet, especially a ballet that is based on a book that's a staple in American literature?
Yeah, I would say that it wasn't about rising through the ranks. I really just I had a vision and I wanted to explore it. And I kind of, wasn't willing to, you know, let people say no. I wanted to pursue this regardless of, what people thought of it or, if they thought I was too young or too inexperienced or anything like that. I really felt like this story needed to be told. And so I kind of went off on a mission to achieve it in any way possible. And so I was very lucky to have, you know, some people who really believed in me. The people who are fiscally sponsoring the production, Artist Plus Productions, they have been a great mentor to me, the people that run that. And they also believed in my project. So, kind of just persevering, kind of trying to create your own, creative world and, just not taking no for an answer and just pushing forward. That was kind of how it was achieved. But I also think that the cast itself are all just these really very kind, wonderful people who kind of bring all of that energy of, Little Women and, this storytelling to life. And so, it- I lead it, but it wouldn't be what it is without everybody else.
Theater, dance, and stage productions in general are going through a sort of evolution, and I think the youth that are really passionate about this are leading stuff into it. Like you said, the immersive the theater or immersive experiences haven't been necessarily for dance, but you had the vision to see that it can be. How important is it for you to not just create something impactful, but create something that's going to be universal and attract a broader audience than just the regular people who are into dance and theater?
Yeah. I Dance has moved me in such a way from when my whole life, I grew up, starting when I was 4, I've been dancing. And it's just like this ethereal feeling of like you could never be happier than in this moment of dancing. And that was kind of what I wanted people to experience, and not necessarily just happiness, but of all emotion. And so, when you know, have audience members walk in to see my work, I want them to laugh, I want them to cry, I want them to feel all the emotions that come with such a like emotionally rich story like Little Women. Um, and to be able to kind of just feel the energy of that story through music, through dance. And so I want people to walk out feeling something greater than themselves, to be moved like they are when they watch a movie or, when they read a wonderful book that they love. But then also at the same time, you know, I, this project has really, been a way to also kind of look at how we're putting on ballets, and the ballet world is changing, slowly changing, but changing nonetheless. And so another important thing was that, young artists, young dancers see characters that are more like themselves, more, relatable versus like a story of like, this is cliche, but like a prince and a princess, something that's more tangible, more tactile, that's less of a fantasy world and more of like a world we actually live in. Because, the Little Women was, like 150, 200 years ago.
Mhm.
But it was based on a real family in a time that actually did exist with people who actually did exist. And so, um, to have that kind of relatable feeling in the story and then putting it into dance is something that I really want for, the next generation of artists as well.
Uh, this play, in this ballet has gone through several different performances. Has it evolved over time? Do you, continue to add to it as you keep on going with this production?
Yeah. It evolves a lot over time. I feel like it's like a painting that we created, and then we keep kind of, changing little things to kind of enhance the project. Depending on, that's the great thing about doing a piece, over and over, is that you can kind of, if you didn't like something in the beginning that you had created, but you ran out of time, you can go back in and manipulate it again or play with it again and see how it would be better in a different context or in a different scenario. And I also love to get the dancers' inputs as well. So like listening to them, like, how did this section work for you? How did that lift work for you? Is there a way we can modify it to make it a little bit more, doable, so that it translates the story better for them, and then they also feel more comfortable doing the material so that they can really focus on the storytelling. Because in my choreography, I try to really work with the dancer's strengths, but it's not so much to like, I want them to do challenging things, but when you're doing movement that you enjoy and that flows nicely, I feel like you're less, um, restricted when it comes to, telling the story. And so I don't really want anything to be in the way of the dancers being able to tell the story of Little Women where the movement gets too, complicated or, it drives away from the storytelling.
Definitely. You are classically trained. What was it about ballet in general that, or in particular that, uh, you know, got you passionate about dancing and continuing on improving your skills?
Yeah, I really loved, the storytelling that was being told in ballet, specifically older, story ballets, Romeo and Juliet, Giselle, different things like that. I liked how literal they were while also like staying very abstract within the dance. So, you're telling a literal story. You understand what's happening in a storyline and it's not abstract, but at the same time, there's no words. So, you're not really, things are still left up to interpretation, and I really liked that. But then the reason that I kind of morphed over was because I also don't like those stories in that they, tell stories that are like out of date or,
Mhm.
don't really relate to anyone in this time period that we're living in. And so I wanted to combine that like love of the literal storytelling mixed with the artistry while moving away from stories that may be a little out of date.
Dance is very tough to learn. It takes a lot of dedication and a lot of hard work to perfect. What is your training regimen? Because I know dancers have to go through so much training, have so many practices. What do you do in order to continue to, be at your best when you're a dancer?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, getting into class is the most important thing. Trying to just, just like normal exercising, it's like getting into the studio every day and trying to create a routine for yourself where you're practicing, the steps you need in order to, keep up your technique and everything. But then also just dancing in general. So like rehearsals, any rehearsals that you're in for shows, that can also help keep that regimen going of, consistency and making sure that you're, taking care of yourself in order to, do the best you can on stage.
How has that transition from being a dancer to being a choreographer changed your way you've seen this? Because now you're not just dancing for you, but you're creating dance for people who might not be at your level or might, be at a higher level. How has your vision changed now that you're a choreographer?
Yeah, I think it actually has allowed me to have a deeper appreciation for, dance and, creating movement, but then also kind of understanding it on a deeper level because like you said, I have dancers who may be, at a lower technique than I was or are at a higher technique than I was. But then you also, with that, it can be a challenge in both
Mhm.
ways because if you have someone who, maybe their technique isn't as strong in certain areas, then that can be a little challenging and maybe you'd have to modify some things for them. But then that allows you to kind of manipulate the choreography in a new way that you may not have before. Or if you have somebody who is particularly gifted in a certain, technique or, they have certain tricks that they can do. It allows you to kind of push the story that much more. And an example is one of our dancers. He has slowly become more of a ballet dancer, but he really is a parkour artist. So he does a lot of, flips and, different stunts and stuff like that. And one of the challenging things was originally like for his role, I had created it more in the genre of ballet. And so then I kind of moved it into incorporating a lot of his stunts and parkour, and that has actually made him a very interesting and unique character in the story. Um, and in that, like, we were able to use his gifts in order to enhance this character in a different way. So, I think for me, it's brought in a new perspective of, how can we best tell the story while
Mhm.
also celebrating everyone's gifts who are, doing this show and creating it for what it is because that becomes the most important thing is like how can everybody help each other to make this the best show possible, without, restricting what can be done based on skill level or anything like that. As long as it's like centering in on the story and making the story be heard.
Awesome. As you're going through this production, are you seeking more stories, and is there anything that you found during this production that you would like to explore more in future projects?
Yeah, I am loving narrative-based work. I really think that that is, a little bit of my calling to tell story to tell, literary stories. Um, I love, trying to explain relationships and not just like romantic relationships or anything like that, but like, for example, like the relationship between the sisters. It's like
Mhm.
any sort of social relationship in dance is very interesting to kind of tell the story of because it kind of gets complicated. Or, when you have like three people in some sort of, tangled web, like um, Amy Amy, the youngest sister, likes Lori, who is their neighbor. But Lori likes Joe, the older sister. And so it's kind of, you can do interesting things like that in like trio work and stuff. And so just kind of explaining stories through dance, having that challenge of not having words to tell the story, has been one of the most exciting things for me. So I definitely see myself doing more literary works. One of my favorite stories is The Great Gatsby, and so I would love to do, a version of that as well. I definitely see that in my future. But yeah, just, telling palpable, um, interesting stories that people love through dance. I think that because we have, a lot of musicals
Mhm.
about all of this stuff, and those are all wonderful things. But I think that having the different genres and the different ways to tell the story is what keeps the stories interesting.
Definitely. And with these new performances that are coming up at Heritage Square Park and Pasadena Playhouse, what are you expecting from it, or what are you hoping to that the audiences get from these new performances?
Yeah, I for the immersives, I hope that people, find comfort in trying something different. I the immersives are very different. You're very close to the dancers when, in each of the houses.
Mhm.
You're not 2 feet from them. So it's a very different way to experience dance. And then at the end, we actually have the audience get up and, do Victorian dancing with the cast if they would like. And I know that not everybody likes to stand up and participate, in stuff like that. But when you get up and you do it, it ends up being like something very enjoyable. And, it's something that kind of brings about community.
Mhm.
Um, we ask everyone to put their phones away at the beginning just to like enjoy the experience. And so it kind of allows people to step back from their lives, step back from the screens, and to enjoy something that's like very, simple in the best way. Like, you're enjoying dance for what it is. You're dancing with other people, you're enjoying something that's, not, on a screen
Mhm.
or anything like that. So that's something that I really love for the immersive, and how much you really get to interact with the story. For the full length, I mean, that was ultimately one of my biggest goals when starting this project
Mhm.
was to create a full length was because I want people to see that ballet can enter this new era of wonderful storytelling. We have great works coming out by wonderful choreographers. This woman made this Frida Kahlo ballet.
Mhm.
Um, there's just like so many. There's Organ Ballet Theater just did Marilyn Monroe.
Mhm.
And so there's all these like women's stories that are really, and it doesn't even have to be women's stories. Christopher Wheeldon just choreographed a piece called Oscar about Oscar Wilde for Australian ballet, but it's just like real people's stories and telling of real people's stories, kind of bringing ballet into this new era of like not only stories that celebrate, inspiring individuals, but also like uplift.
Mhm.
a new community. And so I want to be a part of this movement moving forward, creating these new works that really inspire the next generation and inspire audiences to, want to delight in literature, to, delight in the arts and to, see these great people that existed and to also then reflect on yourself and really think about how, your life is not far from theirs.
Definitely. Well, congratulations on this, and I can't wait to go experience this for myself. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Yes.